But before we dive into your pro wrestling career, tell me a little bit because I was interested. I know a lot about you, but I look back and I peel the layers back, and I wanted to ask you some of these things. For example,
Okay.
tell me, I'm a little confused. You are originally from where?
My original hometown is called Hearne, Texas. They actually
Hearn.
announced me from Hearne for AEW. It's a small little bitty town near
Okay.
Bryan College Station, and Bryan College Station is home of the Texas A&M Aggies. That's the best like
Okay.
location wise I can give anybody that knows Hearne. And there's I guess myself and one other person could be considered the most famous people out of our little town, and he's actually a little slightly more famous than I ever could be. His name's John Randall. He's a NFL Hall of Famer, played for the
Yes.
Minnesota Vikings. He and
Yes.
his brother Urban both played in the NFL, but like I said, John had the Hall of Fame career that he had.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Unbelievable defensive lineman for the Vikings, right? Yeah,
yep,
what
madman.
a career. Yeah. And not a guy that he was probably like 6'1", maybe, something like that, maybe
uh,
at the most.
I don't remember how tall he was, but man,
But
his
he
his
was
ferociousness was
unstoppable.
unmatched. Yep,
Oh yeah, big time. So that's
undrafted and then ultimately
yeah,
became a Hall of Famer.
there you go. So now that we're on football a little bit, this is a perfect little segue here. Tell me about your high school days
Okay.
and how tall you were when you were in high school, because that's part of my question here.
Okay.
So
I graduated high school when I was 18. I was around 6'5" ish, I guess.
okay,
I was tall. I think I probably had my biggest growth spurt between my sophomore and my junior year. But I was a skinny mini man. I was probably 6'5", maybe 185 pounds if I was lucky. So, I mean, but it was a quarterback, and I
yeah,
just wore the red jersey and nobody hit me unless we were in a game, and just chunked the ball as far as I could to the people that would catch it. And then my high school career was the Al Bundy high school career, I guess, because, college and nothing in the pros and whatnot. So,
okay. So 3 years at Howard Payne University, correct?
well, 2 years at Howard Payne and then
Two,
ultimately
okay,
graduated from what is now called Texas State University. It was
exactly.
Southwest Texas when I went
Okay,
there, but now it's Texas State.
and you got your degree in English, correct?
I do. I have a BA in English.
All right. So I was just going to tell. I was telling Tomcat pre-show. I was like, yeah, there's not many quarterbacks that are 6'8"
Yeah,
that have made it all time, and it's just, I mean, it's just like it's having a monster back there, and here we are with our own monster. You know?
right. Just like in pro wrestling, I think the quarterbacks in the NFL have gotten a little bit shorter and
Yeah.
just more athletic, faster, and all that stuff. The game has completely changed, and
Oh, yeah.
same in pro wrestling.
Yep. The run pass option that's opened it up for so many of the smaller quarterbacks that they can use their speed.
Yep.
So I absolutely get it. So from the gridiron into the squared circle, you've really carved your own path in this industry, Lance.
hmm
When did things start to click for you? As far as once you got your feet in the business, when did you start realizing, hey, I like this? I can, I don't only feel this, but I can thrive in this industry.
Right. And the funny thing is it almost didn't happen because like I said, I was playing football, but my
Right.
football career had kind of come to an end. I was working in a nightclub in Austin, Texas. I was a fan of pro wrestling, watching you on TV and guys like Sting and whatnot. Yeah, absolutely. I love Chronic,
Okay.
man. You guys are big and bad and loved watching you kill people. Um, so I wasn't playing ball anymore. I was working in a nightclub. The owner of the club knew I liked wrestling, and a guy started a wrestling school in Austin, Texas. And actually, I got accepted into Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy when he opened his in San Antonio. I would have been a part of the second class, but I'd literally just like a few days prior to his mom, Carol, who was running kind of the financial department of the school at the time,
Right.
she called me to tell me that I was being accepted into the school. And I was like, well, I just had a car accident. I wasn't injured or anything, but poor college kid with a car that was basically totaled. So I didn't really have a way to get to San Antonio from San Marcos. Plus, I didn't have the money because their school was like $3,300 paid off in 3 months. And
Oh,
for a college kid, didn't have that.
yeah.
So anyway, the guy that owned the club that I worked at knew a guy that opened up a wrestling school in Austin. Went in, did a tryout. It was the most painful thing I'd ever done in my life. I played ball, football, basketball, baseball, the different sports through high school and a little bit in college. and, never experienced this kind of pain, just being in the ring. And, they put me through a little bit of everything. And it wasn't like a traditional, like, today you're just going to learn to do running the ropes or something. They kind of gave me a little bit of everything. Here's how you run the ropes. Here's how you take a basic bump. Here's how you drop an elbow. Here's how you do a leg drop. Like, this is all on the first day of my ever touching a ring in my life, not knowing anything other than what I'd seen on TV. And it was the most painful thing that I've ever experienced in my life. And I didn't want to go back. The guy who I didn't, the guy that owned the school called me and he's like, all right, when you coming back, when you starting this? And I said, oh man, I don't think I can afford it. I think his school was like $2,500 or something like that. And I was like, I'm a poor college kid. I don't really have that kind of money. And he goes, well, what can you pay? I was like, $200 a month. And he went, good. And so I kind of backed myself into it, not wanting to go back because it was so painful. Trying to use the financial side of things is the reason I couldn't go back. Then he said okay to what I said, and I was like, all right, well, I can't back out now. And as they say, a lot in life, the rest is history. I started right there, and as far as finding out that this was something I could do, it was a very classic indie company. We had a good ring, we had a good little facility, nothing major, nothing crazy, but it was good. I was consistent, but it was literally like me, this guy named Jason Baker, and my trainer. His name was Solo Faitala, and it was just the three of us, and we just beat the crap out of each other every day. And like, me and Jason would do all his drills that Solo would have us go through, and then when it was time to learn a new move, Solo would teach us, and I'd drop him on his head every day. And that's just kind of how things went. But started working on shows for the Southwest Wrestling Federation, which is the school and company I started with. And then, not too long after that, I started traveling. I started working with Rudy Boy Gonzalez. I started working down in Corpus with the Galvans, different families like that, and places around Texas. And I think that's when it started to click. Like, I have something that people want on their shows. I'm having fun going out there in front of these crowds. I was young, so after I got used to the pain, nothing really hurt. And so that's kind of when I started to decide, if I can keep going with this, I will. And then there was a company in Dallas, Texas called PCW that actually ran a weekly show. They did television in Dallas. It was originally gentleman Chris Adams was the guy who kind of started their company and ran their school. And then when, his passing happened, Red Dog and Jazz, Rodney Mack, both kind of took that over, and they kind of took us under our wing. And that's really, really, really when I started going, this is really something I really want to pursue very hard, because they had TV. So we were going down there every week. We were filming pre-tapes and vignettes. We were having live mics in the ring. We were working for hard cameras, TV style. We had entrance videos. We had all the fun and flash that a big promotion had on an independent scale. And I think that's truly when it started to become fun for me. And as like something that, even though I was working in the nightclub still, I was like, wrestling is what I'd really like to be my next avenue. And unfortunately WCW had shut down, and then TNA started, and then now there was another option, because I'd had some small conversations with the WWF at the time, but again, I was a tall or skinny kid. I maybe weighed 210 at the time. And so I was not physically thick enough for what obviously at the time, especially Vince wanted in his program. So it was seeing TNA come out and become a viable option in the business of professional wrestling kind of gave me a new avenue.
Wow.
Love it. Great
What
story.
an origin story, Brian.
Yeah.
That was awesome.